In November 1944, a remarkable Thanksgiving observance unfolded at Fort Des Moines, Iowa.
This installation housed 63 German female prisoners of war posts, representing the largest contingent of female enemy combatants on American soil. These women, captured during the Allied campaigns in France and Italy, had been thoroughly indoctrinated by Nazi propaganda. This propaganda depicted Americans as brutal captors who would subject them to starvation and abuse, unbeknownst to them. Their most extraordinary wartime experience would involve partaking in a lavish holiday banquet, celebrating a festival entirely foreign to them, and tasting a type of poultry most had never encountered. This account delves into how a traditional American holiday profoundly impacted these German people. Among these prisoners was 29-year-old Hauptfeldwebel Frieda Hartmann, a logistics officer from Hamburg. She had orchestrated supply operations for an entire German division. Her expertise in rationing and food distribution made her acutely aware of the severe shortages plaguing Germany in the advanced stages of the war. She had personally implemented reductions in soldiers' rations to near starvation levels, witnessed the substitution of real coffee with acorn brew, and calculated how to allocate dwindling resources to desperate troops. The opulent spectacle she was about to witness would fundamentally challenge her entire understanding of wartime logistics. Preparations for Thanksgiving were meticulously supervised by Captain Helen Morrison, a seasoned military officer from Des Moines. Captain Morrison firmly believed that upholding American traditions, even within a POW camp, was vital for morale, and served as a potent demonstration of the fundamental distinction between democratic and tyrannical systems. She tirelessly championed the provision of ample Thanksgiving supplies for the facility, convinced that showcasing American gratitude and abundance would be far more persuasive than any propaganda extolling the superiority of democratic governance. When Frieda first learned of the planned Thanksgiving feast, she dismissed it as a cruel jest or a cynical propaganda tactic. The described menu roasted turkey, stuffing, cranberry sauce, sweet potatoes, and multiple pies seemed an impossible fantasy amid global food shortages and stringent rationing. For years, she had rigorously calculated how to sustain soldiers on minimal rations. The casual mention of such a bountiful meal for prisoners of war directly contradicted every principle of wartime resource management she had ever learned. The day before Thanksgiving, Frieda was assigned to kitchen duty as part of her regular camp responsibilities. What she observed there fundamentally shook her understanding of American capabilities and, by extension, her assessment of German strategic capacity. She saw vast quantities of fresh vegetables, flour, and sugar sufficient to feed a German battalion for weeks. And, most incredibly, dozens of colossal turkeys awaiting preparation. Her highly trained eyes instinctively calculated the resources required to provide such a feast, and the implications for the war effort was staggering. However, Chief Cook Sergeant Patricia O'Sullivan, a Boston native, noticed Frieda's stunned expression as she gazed at the ingredients. Patricia had grown up in a large Irish family where providing food was a primary expression of love and community values she carried into her military service. She did not perceive the German posts as adversaries to be punished, but as hungry women far from home, deserving of proper nourishment, irrespective of their nationality. "You'll help me prepare the turkeys," Patricia instructed Frieda in simple English, gesturing towards the rows of immense fowl laid out on the preparation tables. Frieda cautiously approached, having never seen a whole turkey before. In Germany, poultry was typically chicken or goose, and even those had become rare luxuries as the war progressed. The sheer size of these American turkeys, some weighing over 20 pounds, and their overwhelming abundance, bordered on the disconcerting. As Patricia demonstrated the proper techniques for preparing the turkeys, Frieda found herself engaged in an involuntary strategic analysis. If America could supply such vast quantities of food to prisoners of war enemy, soldiers with no productive value to the war effort, what prodigious resources must their own fighting forces possess? The implications for German military planning were devastating. All intelligence reports on American industrial capacity had clearly underestimated their true strength. Other German posts, assigned to kitchen duty, exhibited similar disbelief and apprehension. Oberleutnant Greta Hoffmann, a signals officer from Berlin, whispered to Frieda in German, "If they feed prisoners this well, how well do they feed their own soldiers? We were told the Americans suffer worse shortages than us." The tangible evidence before their eyes starkly contradicted all information provided by German intelligence regarding the state of the American home front. Perhaps most unsettling to Frida's military mind was Patricia's nonchalant attitude towards this abundance. The American sergeant wasted nothing, yet she displayed no anxiety about supplies, no meticulous calculations of rations, and no stress about potential scarcity. She cooked with an assured confidence that there would always be more food. This mindset revealed a level of resource security that Germany had never achieved, even in peacetime. As Frida assisted in stuffing the turkeys with a bread mixture containing more butter than a German family might see in a month, she realized she was participating in more than simple meal preparation. This feast was a potent demonstration of power, not solely military might, but a deeper power of profound abundance. The capacity to generously provision even one's enemies, while simultaneously sustaining massive military operations across multiple continents. Thanksgiving morning brought sights and aromas that induced cognitive dissonance among every German POW in the facility. The rich, savory scent of roasting turkey permeated the barracks, an aroma of plenitude most had never experienced. Through the kitchen windows, Frida observed American staff decorating the mess hall with autumn leaves. Cornucopias, overflowing with lavish food, and handwritten signs in both English and German explaining the Thanksgiving tradition. Before the meal, Lieutenant Sarah Chan, the camp's cultural liaison officer, gathered the German post to briefly explain Thanksgiving. In fluent German, she described the holiday's origins, the historical account of the Pilgrims and Native Americans sharing their harvest, and the tradition of expressing gratitude for bounty and blessings. For women who had managed scarcity for years and witnessed their homeland descend into gradual starvation, the concept of a national holiday celebrating abundance seemed almost fantastical. In America, we believe there is enough food for everyone, Sarah explained, her words translated and murmured among the prisoners. Thanksgiving reminds us to be grateful for all we have and to share it with others. Even those considered strangers are different from us. Frida absorbed these words with the analytical precision of a logistics officer, recognizing the profound difference between a culture built on abundance and one forged through scarcity and competition. With a mixture of curiosity, skepticism, and hunger, the German post filed into the mess hall. What they witnessed surpassed their already heightened expectations. Long tables sagged under the weight of perfectly roasted turkeys, bowls piled high with creamy mashed potatoes, rich gravy boats, candied sweet potatoes, platters of almond, green beans, baskets of fresh bread, and an assortment of pies awaiting on side tables. The sheer quantity of food was astounding, containing more calories than many of them had collectively consumed in months. Captain Morrison rose to address the assembled prisoners and staff. Today we celebrate Thanksgiving, a unique American tradition of expressing gratitude and sharing. You are far from your homes and loved ones, as are many of our own service members. But today, we remember the value in acknowledging our blessings and sharing a meal together, even in difficult times. Her words were translated into German, creating a remarkable moment. Enemy soldiers invited to participate in a celebration of American national identity. Freda sat stiffly as American staff began serving, placing immense portions on her plate with casual generosity. Thick slices of turkey, mountains of side dishes, all prepared with butter, cream, and spices unobtainable in Germany. Her military training had honed her ability to assess logistics and supply chains. The tangible evidence before her unequivocally indicated that America's resource capabilities rendered a German victory mathematically impossible. The first bite of turkey brought a profound silence among the German posts. The meat was moist, flavorful, seasoned with herbs. Most had not tasted in years. Fred had chewed slowly, her analytical mind attempting to process the implications while her body reacted to proper nourishment after months of insufficient rations. Other German women around her exhibited similar reactions. The pleasure of tasting delicious food interwoven with a terrible realization of what this abundance portended for their homeland's prospects. Greta leaned closer to Frida, whispering urgently in German, "This is propaganda. Yes, they are showing us their best to crush our morale. This cannot be normal American food. Nonsense." But Frida had worked in enough military kitchens to distinguish between special preparations and routine plenty. The casual efficiency of the American kitchen staff, the absence of careful rationing, the confident wastage of small scraps all indicated that this level of abundance was commonplace, not exceptional. Patricia O'Sullivan moved through the mess hall, ensuring everyone had enough, offering second servings before the prisoners had even finished their first. Her spirit of generosity seemed intrinsic rather than calculated, rooted in a cultural tradition of hospitality rather than strategic propaganda objectives. When she unasked for, placed another slice of turkey on Frida's plate, this simple act was more devastating than any military defeat. It represented a worldview where scarcity was a temporary condition, not a permanent state. Dr. James Peterson, the camp's medical officer, observed the prisoners' reactions with professional interest. He had been monitoring their health since their arrival, documenting malnutrition and vitamin deficiencies that signaled months of inadequate German military rations. The nutritional completeness provided by the Thanksgiving meal in a single sitting, surpassing what many had received in weeks, starkly highlighted the desperate resource situation confronting Germany. The side dishes were equally astonishing to German palates unfamiliar with American traditions. Sweet potatoes, topped with marshmallows, seemed bizarre to women accustomed to savory cooking. Yet, the combination was surprisingly appealing. Cranberry sauce offered a tart-sweet counterpoint to the rich meats. The stuffing, packed with butter and herbs, represented a week's bread ration for a German family in a single serving. Each dish conveyed a narrative of agricultural bounty and a culinary tradition born of plenty, not scarcity. Lieutenant Chan moved through the mess hall, explaining American Thanksgiving traditions and answering questions about the holiday's significance. The German post learned of family gatherings, football games, and the Mace's Thanksgiving Day parade civilian traditions that continued amidst the war, hinting at an American homeland largely untouched by the conflict that had reduced German cities to rubble. The stark contrast between normalcy on the American home front and the suffering of German civilians became impossible to ignore. As the main meal concluded and desserts appeared, the crisis facing Frida transcended simple military defeat. 3 pies, pumpkin, apple, and pecan were served with fresh whipped cream, containing more sugar and butter in a single serving than she had authorized for an entire military unit in recent months. The mathematical impossibility of sustaining such abundance while simultaneously supporting massive military operations across multiple continents forced her to confront a fundamental flaw in German strategic planning. The pumpkin pie, as a cultural revelation, proved particularly significant. Most German posts had never tasted pumpkin as a dessert, associating it primarily with animal feed rather than a sweet treat. The creamy, spiced custard represented American culinary inventiveness, the ability to transform humble ingredients into luxuries through the generous application of sugar, cream, and spices. Patricia explained the tradition of pumpkin pie at Thanksgiving, its connections to harvest celebrations and indigenous food, painting a picture of an American culture rooted in both abundance and innovation. Dr. Peterson noted the profound psychological impact of the feast on the German posts. Several women quietly wept, overwhelmed by the stark contrast between this bounty and the starvation they knew awaited their families in Germany. The meal had evolved into a form of psychological warfare, more effective than any interrogation. It so thoroughly demonstrated American capability that Germany's continued resistance appeared futile rather than heroic. Captain Morrison made a decision that might have been controversial within military leadership. She invited the German posts to share what they were thankful for, creating a moment of enforced vulnerability that could offer intelligence insights or simply acknowledge their shared humanity. The request created palpable tension among the prisoners, who grappled between military discipline demanding resistance and the human need to express emotion. To her own surprise, Frida found herself speaking first, her English halting but clear. "I am thankful to be alive, and I am thankful that my enemies have shown me that abundance is possible, that there is a place where people do not starve during wartime." Her words hung in the air, both an admission of defeat and a glimmer of hope that perhaps the values represented by this feast could shape the post-war world. Other prisoners gradually shared their own carefully worded gratitude for safety, for adequate food, for being treated with dignity despite being enemies. Each statement revealed the psychological toll of witnessing American plenty while knowing their homeland faced hunger and defeat. The Thanksgiving tradition of expressing gratitude had become a moment of reckoning with uncomfortable truths about resource disparity and strategic realities. As the meal concluded and the prisoners helped clear tables laden with leftover food, Frida conducted her final logistical analysis of the day. The sheer food waste scraps, deemed unfit for storage, Portions too small to save would have been enough to supplement a German company's rations for several days. The casual disposal of such significant quantities of food demonstrated a level of resource security that rendered German military calculations obsolete. The turkey she had consumed was not merely a meal. It was a strategic revelation that would haunt her understanding of the war's inevitable outcome. In the days following Thanksgiving, an unexpected crisis unfolded as the German post struggled to internalize the strategic implications revealed by the feast. Frida found herself unable to sleep, her mind racing with calculations that confirmed the unwelcome truth her gut already knew. Given the resource disparity she had witnessed, German defeat was not merely possible, but mathematically inevitable. The turkey dinner had accomplished what months of propaganda had failed to do. It had shattered her belief in German military planning with irrefutable evidence of American superiority. Lieutenant Chan noticed the psychological impact spreading through the prisoner population and organized discussion sessions to address the emotional aftermath. In these meetings, conducted in German to encourage candor, the women articulated fears and realizations that went far beyond simple homesickness. They spoke of starving families in bombed-out cities, of the falsehoods they had been told about American weakness, and of the moral burden of serving a regime whose strategic assessment had been so catastrophically erroneous. Greta Hoffman broke down in one session, her professional composure gone, as she described coordinating communications for military operations, while knowing civilian rations in German cities had plummeted to near-starvation levels. "We were told sacrifice was necessary," she sobbed, "and that the Americans suffered worse than us. But they feed prisoners better than we feed our own soldiers. Everything we were told was a lie, and we perpetuated those lies through our service." Dr. Peterson documented severe depression and anxiety among the posts who had witnessed the Thanksgiving abundance. The feast had triggered what he termed strategic grief, the profound realization that their sacrifices were for a doomed cause, that their nation's leaders had sent them to fight a war unwinnable by resource mathematics. The turkey dinner served as physical evidence that German propaganda about American weakness had been a systemic fabrication. Captain Morrison faced criticism from superior officers who argued that providing such a lavish feast to enemy prisoners was wasteful and could damage the morale of American troops, who might resent such generosity towards the enemy. She defended her decision by citing the intelligence value of the psychological insights gained and the cooperative attitudes fostered among previously resistant prisoners. Frida requested a private meeting with Captain Morrison to discuss a matter weighing heavily on her conscience. She wished to compile a detailed report on American logistical capabilities for transmission to the German High Command, believing that accurate intelligence about the resource disparity might prompt an earlier German surrender, thereby saving lives on both sides. This request represented a fundamental shift from resistance to active cooperation, based on a professional assessment that continued fighting served no rational purpose. This proposal sparked intense debate among American intelligence officials. Some argued that providing the German military with an accurate assessment of American capabilities would only improve their defensive planning. Others countered that realistic intelligence might persuade German leadership to seek a negotiated peace rather than continue a futile resistance. The decision required approval from Washington and ignited unprecedented discussions about the ethical implications of allowing prisoners of war to provide strategic intelligence to their home country's armed forces. 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, Frida was granted permission to compile her assessment of American logistical capabilities. She immersed herself in the project, meticulously documenting every detail she had observed. The sheer abundance of food, the efficiency of the supply chain, the casual wastage, indicative of seemingly unlimited resources, the quality of medical supplies and equipment, and the psychological confidence characteristic of those who had never truly known scarcity. Her report would become one of the most detailed analyses of American home front capabilities ever penned by a German officer. Patricia O'Sullivan provided unexpected assistance, answering Frida's questions about American agricultural production, food distribution systems, and civilian rationing policies. The cook casually explained how American farms could still produce surpluses during wartime, how rationing was implemented to support military needs without causing civilian starvation, and how industrial capacity allowed for simultaneous military production and consumer goods manufacturing, painting a picture of economic strength Germany had never possessed. Other German posts contributed their own observations to Frida's report. Radio operators described the robustness of American communication infrastructure. Medical personnel documented the abundance of pharmaceutical supplies. Mechanics noted equipment quality that suggested manufacturing capabilities far exceeding Germany's industrial capacity. Each piece added to the growing body of evidence supporting the core conclusion. Germany faced an enemy whose resource advantage made defeat inevitable, regardless of battlefield tactics or soldierly courage. Lieutenant Chen assisted with the translation and verification of the report's technical details, ensuring accuracy while removing any information that could compromise specific military operations. This process fostered an unusual collaboration between former enemies, united in their shared goal of reducing unnecessary casualties through realistic strategic assessment. The Thanksgiving feast had built sufficient trust to enable prisoners to voluntarily offer information in service of what they perceived as a humanitarian objective. Dr. Peterson incorporated a psychological assessment, documenting how exposure to American abundance had impacted the post morale and strategic understanding. His observations highlighted that the Thanksgiving feast had achieved a morale defeat more effective than any interrogation technique, not through cruelty, but through a demonstration of capabilities that rendered a German victory scenario impossible. The turkey dinner served as physical evidence that resource mathematics in modern warfare was more decisive than ideology or tactical prowess. When Frieda's completed report reached the German High Command via international Red Cross channels, the response utterly crushed her last vestiges of hope for rational leadership. Despite her established credibility and professional reputation, her detailed technical analysis was dismissed as enemy propaganda. Intelligence officers, who had never personally witnessed American capabilities, rejected the assessment from a trained logistics expert who had directly observed them, preferring the comfort of illusion over uncomfortable truth. This rejection confirmed everything the Thanksgiving feast had taught the prisoners about the fundamental differences between their two nations. America's abundance allowed for evidence-based decision-making and adaptation to reality, while Germany's scarcity had fostered a culture where ideology superseded facts and wishful thinking replaced strategic analysis. This contrast explained why one nation could offer a feast to its prisoners of war, while the other starved its own civilians. As Christmas approached, the German posts faced their first holiday season in captivity, and their first celebration since comprehending the true desperation of their homeland's situation. Captain Morrison proposed another traditional American feast, but this time incorporating German Christmas traditions taught by the prisoners to the American staff. This cultural exchange would acknowledge shared humanity while respecting the distinct identities that made them former adversaries. Frieda found herself helping to plan a celebration that honored both American and German Christmas customs. Patricia O'Sullivan sourced ingredients required for traditional German cookies and Christmas breads, while the German Post taught American staff authentic recipes passed down through generations. The kitchen transformed into a space where former enemies discovered their grandmothers had used similar techniques to craft holiday treats, revealing cultural connections that transcended political divides. The preparations offered unexpected emotional healing for prisoners struggling with depression and survivor's guilt, crafting traditional foods from their homeland, teaching recipes to interested Americans, and participating in familiar holiday rituals provided solace, while acknowledging that they might never see their families again. The act of preserving cultural traditions by sharing them with former enemies felt both like a betrayal and the only meaningful resistance left. Greta Hoffmann led the German posts in making Lebkuchen gingerbread, a spiced cookie requiring ingredients they hadn't seen in years. Real honey, almonds, candied fruits, authentic spices. As she demonstrated the techniques her grandmother had taught her, tears streamed down her face, and she explained that these cookies represented everything the war had destroyed. Family traditions, abundant food, the simple joy of baking for loved ones, instead of calculating military rations. Christmas Eve celebrations brought German and American women together, acknowledging shared griefs and hopes that transcended their political circumstances. They sang carols in two languages, shared food from both traditions, and acknowledged that their losses, whether from Allied bombing or Axis aggression, had created a common ground ideology could not erase. The Thanksgiving turkey had initiated this transformation, proving that abundance could be shared even with enemies. Dr. Peterson observed a profound psychological shift as the prisoners participated in these holiday celebrations that both honored their cultural identity and acknowledged their current reality. The combination of familiar traditions and unexpected acceptance created space for processing trauma and beginning to envision a future beyond the war. These feasts demonstrated that enemies could discover shared humanity while maintaining their distinct identities. As Frida helped serve traditional German Christmas stolen alongside American Christmas ham, she reflected on how food had become the language through which enemies learned to see each other as human. The Thanksgiving turkey had shattered her illusions about Germany's strategic prospects. But these Christmas celebrations offered something even more valuable: the possibility that abundance and generosity could characterize the post-war world. That scarcity and competition need not define human relationships, even between former adversaries. In the spring of 1945, Germany surrendered, confirming all of Frida's assessments that victory was impossible, given America's resource advantage. The end came not from a heroic last stand, but from a simple mathematical reality. A nation cannot sustain a war when its civilians are starving and its industrial capacity lies in ruins. The Thanksgiving turkey had been an early indicator of these resource disparities that made defeat inevitable. The repatriation process revealed the lasting impact of the holiday feasts on the prisoners' psychology and post-war attitudes. Many German women, if possible, chose to remain in the United States, having witnessed firsthand a society of such plenty that it allowed for generosity even towards enemies. Frida was among those who sought sponsorship for immigration, recognizing that her logistical expertise would be far more valuable in American reconstruction efforts, where her skills would be applied to distributing abundance rather than managing scarcity, than in a devastated Germany. Captain Morrison's controversial decision to provide a lavish Thanksgiving feast to enemy prisoners was ultimately vindicated by the intelligence gathered and the cooperation fought. Her firm belief in demonstrating American values through action, rather than mere propaganda, had proven more effective than any interrogation technique. The turkey dinner achieved strategic objectives while upholding the humanitarian principles that distinguished a democratic society from an autocratic regime. Patricia Sullivan maintained correspondence with several former prisoners, who credited her generosity with their ability to move past psychological trauma and envision a future beyond defeat. The recipes they exchanged became the foundation for fusion cuisines, blending German precision with American abundance to create culinary traditions that honored both cultures and acknowledged their complex shared history. Lieutenant Chan's cultural exchange program, initiated through the holiday celebrations, became a model for post-war reconciliation efforts. Her recognition that food traditions could serve as bridges between former enemies influenced Reconstruction policies that emphasized cultural preservation and exchange, rather than forced assimilation or punitive destruction of German identity. Dr. Peterson's research into the psychological effects of abundance versus scarcity shaped understanding of how resource security impacts national character and strategic decisions. His documented case of how a single Thanksgiving meal achieved a more effective morale defeat than months of traditional interrogation influenced military psychology and prisoner of war treatment policies throughout the Cold War. Frida's logistical expertise found new purpose in reconstruction, applying her skills from calculating military rations to designing efficient food distribution systems for displaced persons. Her experience witnessing American abundance taught her that scarcity was a choice, not an inevitability. Proper logistics, guided by values of equity rather than hoarding, could ensure adequate nourishment even in challenging environments. Decades later, when asked about her most transformative wartime experience, Frida consistently recounted that November afternoon when she first saw American turkeys being prepared for Thanksgiving dinner. The sight of such abundant food, provided to enemy prisoners, shattered every assumption instilled by Nazi propaganda about American weakness and German superiority. More profoundly, it demonstrated that a society built on principles of abundance, rather than scarcity, could extend generosity even to its adversaries. The Thanksgiving tradition, once so alien to the German POWs, became something many embraced in their new American lives, symbolizing the values that distinguished their captors from their own failed leadership. Frida herself hosted Thanksgiving dinners annually, blending American turkey with German side dishes, creating a celebration that fused the culture she had left behind with the society she had joined. Patricia O'Sullivan's simple act of sharing traditional American abundance accomplished what political speeches and military victories could not. It provided concrete evidence that a democracy rooted in agricultural and industrial plenty could, even while fighting a global war, extend humanitarian treatment to its enemies. The turkey dinner proved that American strength stemmed not from cruelty or exploitation, but from productive capacity and a cultural value system that prioritized abundance over scarcity. The recipes exchanged during those holiday celebrations became cherished family heirlooms, each dish carrying stories of unexpected friendships forged between former enemies over shared meals. Frida's grandchildren learned to prepare both Thanksgiving turkey and German Christmas stollen. Understanding their family history encompassed both the destruction of war and the possibility of reconciliation through mutual recognition of common humanity. Frida's logistical analysis report, penned after Thanksgiving, became required reading in military academies, studying the relationship between industrial capacity and strategic success. A detailed documentation of how casual American abundance revealed resource disparities that made German defeat inevitable, illustrated the decisive importance of logistics in modern warfare. It proved that ammunition and ideology mattered far less than the ability to adequately feed one's soldiers and civilians. Dr. Peterson's research on strategic grief, the psychological trauma experienced by soldiers realizing their sacrifices were for an impossible cause, influenced approaches to trauma therapy for veterans, dealing with disillusionment toward leadership that sent them to fight unwinnable wars. The Thanksgiving feast served as a case study demonstrating how physical evidence of enemy capability could trigger a psychological crisis more effectively than any propaganda. As Frida reflected on her journey from German logistics officer to American immigrant, she understood that the Thanksgiving turkey had taught her the most important lesson of the war. That abundance allows for generosity, scarcity breeds cruelty, and the values a society chooses to uphold in conflict reveal its true character more clearly than any pronouncement of ideology or national superiority. Her initial question that first Thanksgiving, is this really turkey, held deeper meaning than simple culinary curiosity. It was a question about whether this abundance was real, whether a nation truly could be so generous to its enemies, and whether the world she thought she understood still existed. The answer was yes. It was indeed turkey, prepared with casual abundance, demonstrating a capability beyond our previous comprehension and forever altering our beliefs about power, resources, and the possibilities of human dignity. Even amidst humanity's most destructive impulses,